Good morning, everyone. Welcome, delegates. Welcome, alternates. Welcome, members of the public, to the final meeting of the Arizona Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan Steering Committee of 2018 and 19. The main purpose for today's meeting is to wrap up, even though not every last detail is solidified as far as the internal Arizona implementation plan. The purpose of today's meeting is to give a final status report to the delegates, alternates, and the public on all of the hard work that has been done by this committee. And actually, it's kind of a celebratory mood for all of the work that has been done. It hasn't always been easy, but it's always been very high quality, important work for the state of Arizona. And that's the tone that we would like to set for today. So the agenda for today includes the welcome and introductions, and we'll start in a minute with Ms. Campbell over here on the left-hand side and go around the room and introduce the delegates or alternates. We'll provide an Arizona DCP legislative recap of the historic legislation that passed a couple of weeks ago, a status on the implementation inside Arizona, a look forward to congressional approval and the strategy and timing for that, and then, as we always do, delegates' comments, steering committee resolution that we'll talk about when we get there. We've provided copies of that in advance to the delegates. There's a copy of it at each person's place. It's a non-binding pledge, basically, to complete the work on implementing DCP in Arizona. And then we don't have it on the agenda, but there will be time for public comment as well at the end. So with that, let us start with Cynthia Campbell, City of Phoenix.
My name is Cynthia Campbell from the City of Phoenix.
Doug Dunham, sitting in for Joe Geisel for Epcor Water.
Javier Sedovich, City of Goodyear.
Glenn Hammer, Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Chelsea McGuire, Arizona Farm Bureau, filling in for Stephanie Smallhouse.
Dave Roberts on behalf of SRP.
Bill Garfield, Arizona Water Company.
Brad Strader from Roosevelt Water, representing Phoenix Agriculture, standing in for Shane Leonard.
Dennis Rule, alternate for David Godleski, representing Southern Arizona Home Builders Association.
Good morning, Laura Grignano, Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District.
Dennis Patch, Chairman, Colorado Indian Tribes.
Hunter Moore, Governor's Office.
Ted Cook, CAWCD.
Tom Bushosky, DWR.
Leslie Myers, Bureau of Reclamation.
Lisa Atkins, CAWCD Board of Directors.
Karen Caesar, CAWCD Board of Directors.
Stephen Earl Lewis, Governor of the Gila River Indian Community.
Paul Orm, Pinell County Agriculture.
Rob Anderson here for alternate for Spencer Camps, Home Builders Association of Central Arizona.
Joe Olson, Metro Water District.
Tim Tomier, Director of Tucson Water.
John Kamik, alternate for Brian Wong, representing Pima County Agriculture and Southern Arizona Water Users Association.
Kevin Moran, EDF and Water for Arizona Coalition, alternate for Ted Kowalski of Walton Family Foundation.
Virginia O'Connell, Arizona Water Bank.
Brian Biesmeyer, Scottsdale Water.
Ted Maxwell, Southern Arizona Leadership Council.
Sandy Favorites with Freeport.
Wade Noble, Yuma.
Jamie Kelly, Mojave County Water Authority.
Cheryl Lombard, Valley Partnership.
Thank you, everyone. Before we get started on the agenda, we have a couple of the delegates who would like to make a statement to the rest of the of the committee this morning, and I think it will be no surprise to everyone of the subject matter here, and I think it's the right thing to do to have this discussion up front so that it does not overshadow the rest of our proceedings today. So we'd like to start with Governor Stephen Roe Lewis from the Gila River Indian community.
Thank you. And Tom and Ted, I think it's important that I make a brief statement at the onset of today's meeting. And I'm also joined by Councilman Barney Enos from our 17-member Community Council as well. As you know, Speaker Bowers has introduced a bill during the middle of our finalization of DCP, HB 2476. HB 2476, to which the community has objected. I wrote to you last month as soon as it was introduced in order to make our position on the bill very clear and to make clear that its consideration constituted a real threat to the community's continued participation in DCP. HB 2476 proposes the complete repeal of the statutory law of forfeiture in the state of Arizona. It does so during a time of crisis for our state, with the first drought about to be declared on the Colorado River ever. This bill, we strongly believe, is unconstitutional on its face and should be rejected on that ground alone. If enacted into law, HB 2476 would make Arizona the only state of the 16 who have nearly identical laws to repeal such a fundamental principle of Western water law. The policy basis for this proposal is that the community has sought to enforce the law of forfeiture against a limited number of powerfully connected parties who are located in the upper valley of the Gila River. As such, the explicit purpose for the law is to use the power of the Arizona legislature for the benefit of a select group of individuals to divide and conquer, to directly attack the community and deprive us of our legal rights to seek redress in the courts. HB 2476 is the epitome of special interest legislation that undermines critical principles of Arizona water law. Principles that have been enshrined in the state's water code since Arizona became a state. Eliminating this core doctrine of beneficial use in time of extreme drought solely for the purpose of protecting a small group of farmers who have sat on their rights, in some instances for decades, is the worst kind of water policy and should be rejected by the legislature out of hand. Based on Arizona Supreme Court precedent in a case that is directly on point with this proposed bill, the San Carlos Apache case, HB 2476 is also patently unconstitutional on its face as well. By attacking the community using the power of the state legislature rather than the courts, that we consider an ad hominem attack, at a time when the community has made every effort possible to act as a genuine partner in good faith to the state in developing a viable drought contingency plan for the state, HB 2476 also puts the community in an untenable position. The community cannot be singled out for a legislative attack by the most powerful members of the Arizona House of Representatives and still view itself as a genuine partner in solving the state's water crisis. We view this as a slap in the face to the community. As a result, the community has made clear that it cannot move forward with the drought contingency plan if HB 2476 is still under consideration by the Arizona legislature. The community strongly believes that the bill is intended solely to send a message to the community that if it presumes to enforce its legal rights of any kind in lawful judicial proceedings, against the powerfully connected, that the state will simply change the rule of the game and seek to deprive the community of its rights to do so by a legislative fiat. To date, the community has judiciously sought to enforce its rights under its settlement through legal actions, in which it has prevailed continuously and without exception. This means that a court of law has examined the merits of the community's claims and found them to be justified and worthy of enforcement. When settled, the community has received attorney's fees as part of the settlement. The number of actions we have brought has been very limited in number so far, but I can no longer promise that we will hold back any longer. My council and my people will not sit idly by while being attacked brazenly in open daylight this way. The legislative hearing being held on HB 2476 today, this afternoon, is precisely the wrong arena in which to consider the facts and merits of the competing claims by each side, which is why the community is not participating. Courts of law are established for this kind of judicial inquiry into the merits and equity of claims such as these, not legislatures, particularly in a form that is being managed by the proponents of the legislation, these same parties, in question solely for the purpose of attacking my community. So I want to answer a question then. Why has the Community Council decided to not consider approving DCP unless HB 2476 is withdrawn? For almost 3 years, the community has worked hard with the state and numerous water users in the state to try to craft a viable plan to allow Arizona to enter into the Interstate Drought Contingency Plan. While the Drought Contingency Plan would result in huge reductions in the delivery of water for the community recognized that the state will face a crisis if something is not done, that we will all be affected monumentally. And the community undertook extraordinary efforts to assist the state cooperatively, respectfully, in finding a path forward in line with our value systems, in line with our respect for the water that we trace back to our ancestors, the Hogan people, that have farmed, that have irrigated, that have used this water so beneficially thousands of years ago. But those efforts have not always been welcomed with open arms, with many in the state unfairly questioning the community's motives and intentions and seeking to block the community from having any voice in how its water supplies could or would be used. At one point, plans were discussed that would have essentially have simply stripped huge water supplies from the community with no mitigation whatsoever during this process, nor any conservation to Lake Mead, seeking simply to take the community's water again and deliver it to other more powerful water players in the state. Over time, the community has been able to forge trust and relationships necessary to craft a viable plan for mitigation and conservation that will meet the state's needs now and for the foreseeable future. With the community being a meaningful and trusted partner in this process, or so we have thought, HB 2476 undoes all of this, Speaker, and puts the community back in the position of an adversary whose legal rights would be subject to legislative rewrite simply because the community dared to exercise our own legal rights ourselves. The community has heard from hundreds of individuals, entities, and policymakers across the state, including many senior Republican members of the legislature and many in this room, expressing support for our position and understanding of why the community views HB 2046 to be the essential breach of faith that it actually is. That said, actions now speak louder than words, and it is time for the state legislature to make an important choice. The legislature can continue to consider this unconstitutional legislation that seeks to put the community, quote, back in its place, or it can embrace the partnership that the community has always offered as a fully integrated member of Arizona water policy, only working together to solve the challenges that we all face here in Arizona. The choice is clear, and it should be obvious. The community will await the outcome, but not with fear or anxiety. Our path is clear in either event, and the community will find a way to prosper regardless, as we have done for hundreds, for thousands of years, from time immemorial. We always have, and we always will. Based on the countless expressions of support to date, I am confident that the Arizona legislature will do the right thing and reject this bill outright. That confidence is what leads me to stay in our discussions today and continue working with the partners we have developed in this room over the course of our many months and years of work together on this. I'm supported by my council, I'm supported by my people, I'm supported by my elders. The time may come when we need to publicly withdraw, though, from the discussions. But today is not that day. Whatever the outcome of this legislation, I will need to go back to my council and seek their final approval of DCP. As Councilman Enos, representing our council, will attest, this unnecessary and unconstitutional legislation is only going to make that much more difficult if we and when that time comes. We appreciate your support around this table and all this, and look forward to today's discussions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Hunter.
Members of the steering committee, members of the legislature, and to our guests in the audience, my name is Hunter Moore. I'm the Governor's Policy Advisor for Natural Resources. I appreciate the gravity of the situation and the comments made by Governor Lewis. I would first like to thank all of the steering committee members. This has been a hard-fought battle to get to this point. We are not at a point where we need to shrink from difficult discussions. This steering committee and the Arizona legislature took some very decisive action last month when decisive action was needed, and in a nearly unanimous fashion. We are grateful to the members of the steering committee and to the members of the legislature for getting that done. I would also like to say to Governor Lewis that we appreciate that the community is staying at the table, and I cannot see Councilman Enos, but I would express my appreciation to him and to the council members for their interaction with Governor Lewis and the difficult decisions that they're making, as well as all of the other councils that all of our members have to deal with, and especially the decision makers that they report to. But I do appreciate that the community is deciding to stay at the table. Thank you. The concerns about HB 2476 are noted by the administration. We believe that as members of the legislature are presented with the decision on that bill, they will remember that significant compromises have been made to bring us to this point. The DCP implementation plan has been all about honoring the position of the parties when they have made it known that their rights or position will be dramatically or detrimentally affected. And this is now the case for the community as it relates to the bill, and we ask that the legislative members consider this as they deliberate over how to proceed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Speaker Bowers.
Thank you. I am surprised at the use of this venue to make this the focus of this, what should be a more celebratory situation. Sitting right here, I, months ago, said that I would not use this bill to fulcrum any of my legislation in issues that were brought to my attention during a tour of the state with then Senator Griffin. One of those meetings, two of those meetings were in the eastern part of the state, one in Safford and the other in Morenci. And I have the testimony here of the people who spoke. The declaration that forfeiture and abandonment, which are addressed in my bill, are somehow tied to DCP is difficult to fathom. I would like, and inasmuch as I didn't come with a prepared statement, I'm going to have to take my statement from the letter written by Governor Lewis to Misters Bushatsky and Cook, in which he referred to a historical part of their litigation against landowners in the eastern part of the state. Reading, under the UV forbearance agreement, the Upper Gila River landowners were allowed time to submit sever and transfer applications to transfer their Globe Equity Decree water rights to more productive lands that did not have such rights. It actually says did not have Globe Equity Decree rights. They were allowed to transfer these rights to other lands that did not have such rights at $1,000 an application. On the second page, a total of 419 sever and transfer applications were filed in 2008. These people are classified as powerfully connected parties. If you've never traveled over there, that could be taken at its face. But when you see the farming operations, and many of these people who have been affected, and some have made themselves wealthy. And I don't think making themselves wealthy is unknown to people in this room. During this process, it was discovered that some of the Globe Equity Decree rights that landowners were seeking to sever had not been used for long periods of time. So there was litigation. The plaintiffs were able to secure the opportunity to sever and transfer their rights at a cost. Upon severing and upon following that offer, the information in the offer was then examined by the community and the community's lawyers. The community, the San Carlos Apache tribe, and the United States objected to all of these applications for numerous reasons, but one of the grounds was objecting to a sever and transfer application, that the rights subject to the application had been partially or fully forfeited and or abandoned under Arizona law. The state of Arizona has never exercised a forfeiture action against a well owner, to my knowledge, period, until now. All 419 of these applications were ultimately withdrawn or rejected. And it was litigated, as Governor Lewis said. He claims to the Supreme Court, my knowledge is only that to the U.S. Ninth Circuit. Since that time, the community began a deliberate process of identifying lands that are subject to forfeiture pursuant to this decision. In December, they filed a limited number of forfeiture actions against certain landowners in the upper valley of the Gila River. I believe there was some 20, and it's now down to, I believe, 7. In recognition of the importance of DCP and to avoid upsetting the delicate balance of interests that the Arizona DCP implementation plan represents, the community has not filed any additional enforcement actions until, and I understand the threat of today. Then the introduction of 2476 comes in the midst of the legislative consideration of DCP. I did not push 2476 or connect it in any way to the DCP to avoid upsetting the delicate balance of interests that the Arizona DCP implementation plan represents. I pulled that bill. I kept that bill off until we had signed the DCP. I see these as separate. There are people in this room who are suing each other right now. Yet we are all in this room working on a separate issue. We're not leveraging the facts of our various litigative positions against the DCP. We are putting them aside in favor of the DCP. In the Ninth Circuit decision, the judge cites that the final arbiter of this decision is the Arizona Supreme Court. With this letter, seeing that there are 419 initial, and knowing that the community has already filed and sent letters, I should say, to other claimants or plaintiffs, possible plaintiffs, and on other river systems, to my knowledge, with this deliberate process of identifying lands, it seems plausible to me that their future plans would include many other possible defendants. In the rivers that contribute to the Gila, there are thousands and thousands of wells. Is it reasonable for me as a legislator to consider the broad prospective use of forfeiture actions that have never been used in the history, nor can they be exercised against the tribes? Is it plausible for me to think that the burden that will come upon thousands of well owners on the Verde River, on the San Pedro, on the Upper Salt, or any other contributory areas could be coming next? This is the driver for my desire to prospectively address the use of forfeiture laws to help those possible defendants. This is precisely the wrong arena for me to be doing this. I'm sorry that I have been put in this position. There are people in this room who promised that they would do what they could to help, and I am one of them. I promised that I would do what I could. I knew that I could not help people under current litigation. I can't do that. But I would do what I could to help those in the future who could be affected. These so-called powerfully connected parties who sat on their rights for decades after the river took their land away and they couldn't put their water on it, expecting them to use forfeiture, which is based on a premise of use it or lose it. And in this room, we're talking about conservation. They don't have property many times because the river has made it unusable, yet they still have to pump in order to keep the use of the well. And we're talking about conservation. It is my intention to continue to help crafting a viable DCP plan. I'm grateful that the governor has stated likewise that that is his desire. I want him to be here. I want his interest to be blessed, and that it would be a blessing to his tribal interests and to any others who are here at this table. We have made a great plan. It is not connected with other legislative either priorities or actions. and I hope that we can see through that and handle those separately from what the state needs in this plan. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion from any of the delegates on this topic? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. Arizona DCP legislative recap. Turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, Ted. As we can see on the screen, we're referring to SJR and HJR 1001 and 2002, the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan. That resolution included language to authorize the DWR director to sign the interstate DCP agreements on behalf of the state of Arizona if two things occur. First, federal legislation passes directing the Secretary of the Interior to execute and implement the DCP agreements, and we'll give you an update later on where we're at in that process. All other parties other than the United States and the state of Arizona have authorized the execution of DCP agreements. And I think we are largely at that place where the other parties have authorized that execution, with perhaps the lone exception with the Imperial Irrigation District in California having conditionally authorized their signing based on a couple of conditions. One, making sure Arizona is going to go first and others are going to go first, but also seeking some federal help on their issues with the Salton Sea. Go ahead. So as we just heard a little bit about the Arizona implementation plan and all the good work that was done in this room to get that plan put together, there were other pieces of legislation in a package, SB 1227 and HB 2545, the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan amendments that set up the ability to implement or effectuate the intra-Arizona plan. And here are some of the bullets summarizing that legislation. So first, authorization for the Arizona Water Banking Authority to exchange existing long-term storage credits between active management areas, and then waiving the fee for that transfer, those fees being a one-time fee per transaction. Again, this was to effectuate wet water going to agriculture, who was losing some of their wet water as a result of DCP. So that is the USF to GSF essentially discussion we had in this room. Second, increasing the accrual of long-term storage credits for existing effluent managed recharge facilities from 50 to 95%, and allowing those credits to be applied to assured water supply determinations, and also extending the ability to accrue long-term storage credits beyond 2025 for storage of effluent and water imported into an AMA or groundwater basin. And again, this was essentially to help establish the program that the city of Tucson threw on the table to create a backstop in case we go into Tier 2 in one of the first 3 years of the plan. Tier 2 then having the impact of further reducing CAP agriculture by 35,000 acre feet, and Tucson putting that same volume of water up to 70,000 acre feet on the table as a backstop to that occurring. And again, this was also a limited change to the managed recharge facility program. And then third, also a limited change, the repeal of WaterBud, specifically in the Pinal AMA for the pendency of the drought contingency plan. Again, that was designed to help get, again, wet water to the Pinal County agricultural entities as part of the implementation plan. And then a groundwater irrigation efficiency project fund, so a general fund appropriation of $7 million, $2 million from existing DWR drought contingency plan funds. So again, that money was originally designed to be spent on system conservation under the former DCP Plus plan. $2 million of that $4 million now going to this groundwater and irrigation efficiency projects fund, and then a brand new appropriation of $5 million. It also includes repurposing the Pinal withdrawal fee for groundwater infrastructure in the Pinal AMA and showing an intent clause, the intention of making this program actually work in a certain way, creating certainty for CAP agriculture. I do want to point out, and we discussed this in this room about the repurposing of the Pinal withdrawal fee, that we were projecting a shortage in some of the, I'll call them, other programs in the Pinal active management area, irrigation management efficiency, Pinal Water Augmentation Authority, and water education. We recognized about a $75,000 shortfall. I just sent a letter to the Groundwater Users Advisory Council saying that in 2020 we would lower the water bank withdrawal fee, the fee that is being repurposed, by 25 cents an acre foot, and increase the conservation and augmentation amount from 25 cents to 50 cents, thus creating that $75,000 of money for the shortfall, at the same time keeping the total withdrawal fee capped at the same level we expected it to be at. I did send that letter recently, and again, we talked about that as part of the discussion of the implementation plan. It was best to do that administratively rather than legislatively, and that's why we did it that way. Go ahead. Some additional amendments. The creation of the Arizona System Conservation Fund. Again, a general fund appropriation of $30 million. And DWR given the authority to act as a fiscal agent for NGO contributions, about $8 million, which I understand is going to come through EDF now, correct?
That's correct.
And thank you to EDF and all the contributors there too. And again, that money was designed to go to the Colorado Indian Tribes System Conservation Program, creating a total of 150,000 acre feet of system conservation water, 50,000 acre foot a year for the first 3 years of the program. And then taking the remaining $2 million that was originally in DWR's budget for system conservation and pledging that to augmentation and conservation funding within the active management areas, and with the program being put together in a way that folks could go to their respective groundwater user advisory councils, make proposals to access this money for the purposes of augmentation and conservation. Those groundwater user advisory councils, as they do now, making a recommendation to the director, who would then formally approve the project and the money for those purposes. And then lastly, a requirement for DWR to report to the legislature on the intra-Arizona DCP agreements as they are being considered by the governing bodies. And I am happy to report that the first report should be going to the legislature today, because we understand that on Wednesday, if I have the date right, the City of Phoenix has 3 agreements up in front of the City Council. So I would ask all of you who are involved in any of the intra-Arizona agreements, I would happily take your input when you're about to go to your governing bodies so I can fulfill the requirement of that report. And so Speaker Bowers, you'll be getting something from me later today.
Thank you.
So I want to applaud the City of Phoenix going forth. I think they're the first ones formally doing this. We've got to keep that momentum moving forward. Ted, it's still me. So, in the celebratory mode that we heard about earlier today, here is a photograph of the January 31st, 2019 signing. For those of you who are not aware, that room is where the 1980 Groundwater Management Act was signed. Same place 39 years or so later. as I was walking down to the legislature to attend the signing ceremony, which happened all on very short notice. I think we put out a message maybe about 10 or 15 minutes before it actually happened. As a call to all our steering committee friends to try and make it down there. There were several people in the courtyard who were there not for these purposes, who kind of saw the congregation and decided to come up and join the celebration, which I thought was really interesting, but also really indicative of how important this moment was. All the hard work done by all of you in this room, by our legislative representatives in both houses, in both the majority and minority, and in the executive branch, the governor's office, et cetera. So it was a great day, and it's a great picture, and I think if we had had more time, there'd probably be 3 times as many people in that picture as is actually there. Go ahead. And then one last item that was part of the package, but it was not legislation, and that was an executive order signed that same time and place by Governor Ducey. It repealed the existing Governor's Water Augmentation Council, which had been created in the fall of 2015, and replaced it with a new council, the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council, again, to investigate long-term augmentation and conservation and innovation strategies for dealing with our water future. We intend to at least meet quarterly, and we will certainly have working groups. It will be chaired as it was the prior group, chaired by the director of DWR. However, this iteration includes the previous members of the GWAC, but also members from the legislature. I think one lesson we learned, and what worked very well, Speaker, was having you and the legislative members here to listen to your counsel, for you to listen to the concerns of the stakeholders, for you to listen directly to where the stakeholders were willing to compromise. And I thought that was obviously key to the success of the Drought Contingency Plan, and we hope to repeat that through this executive order. And again, we will make sure that we have transparency and a strong communication plan to make sure that everyone understands where the efforts are going, have been, and will head out into the future. So tentatively, and we have not put out hold a date yet because we are still looking at the membership list, but if you could mark your calendars for the morning of March 8th for the first meeting of the new council. And again, I think we are probably heading towards 3 things in that first meeting beyond process, and that would be carrying forth the desalination work group, the augmentation work group, carrying those forth, and starting to look at additional conservation activities and potentially revisiting the goals of the active management areas under the groundwater code, as I think the first 3 items they were going to tackle. Again, hopefully for me, the director of DWR, revisiting those goals and looking at additional conservation potential in the AMAs in all of the sectors will feed into our work. In the 5th management plans, we'll be completing the 4th management plans over the next couple of years, but wanting to hear where we should be going and do something substantive in the 5th management plans as we move forward with those plans. So before we move on to the next part of the presentation, questions about the legislative package, questions about the executive order, comments from delegates on any of these items? Seeing none, I'll turn it back over to Ted.
Thank you. So now we will move to a status report on the intra-Arizona implementation. We've got on this slide and the next slide, I think the number is 16 different implementation agreements that are related in one way or another to the implementation of LBDCP in Arizona. Let me start off by saying that there are probably many more things discussions that are ongoing that do not appear on this list that may or may not be pieces of various of these things. When I get to page 2, in just a moment, I'm going to ask Ms. Campbell if she might share with us which of the agreements that the City Council from the City of Phoenix are considering in its upcoming meeting. I would like to start on this page, though, with the two items at the bottom of the slide, number 8 and number 9. So green means completed. And the final item on there was a pair of letters that Director Bushatsky and I exchanged that, and we did that on the eve of the January 31st legislative action that took place that paved the way for ADWR to be the sole signer on behalf of Arizona as a piece of that arrangement that we had agreed to allow that to happen. Right above that is another piece of that, which is an agreement between the United States and CWCD that engages CWCD in its obligations under DCP as not being a signatory to the interstate agreement. That was approved by the CWCD board on January 31st at a special board meeting in the morning, and it awaits the signature of the United States. Go back up to the top now. The first agreement listed there is called the Arizona Implementation Agreement. You can see on the far right column the parties, ADWR, CWCD, and others, probably many others. It is often referred to as the overarching agreement that will bind together, basically, or glue together all of the other number of agreements that are on these two pages. We're doing our best to include all of the obligations of the various parties in all of these underlying agreements, but there may be some instances when it makes sense to put certain obligations into this agreement. That'll probably happen as one of the last things as everything begins to coalesce to be done. The next two, number 2 and number 3, are the mitigation agreements for the CAP Ag Pool and the CAP NIA Pool. And just to remind everybody that the NIA Pool is senior to the Ag Pool, and so at least during the period of time that there is Ag Pool mitigation and NIA mitigation at the same time, the NIA Pool has to be full in order to provide any ag mitigation at all. And ag mitigation will occur in Tier 1 or Tier 2 shortage in 2020, 2021, and 2022. And thereafter, it will only be NIA mitigation from 2023 through 2025. The ag mitigation terms are fairly straightforward. The NIA terms involve both water and money mitigation, and so it's pretty complicated to make sure that works the way that it's supposed to, and you don't run out of one resource prior to running out of the other resource. And lots of folks are working very diligently on those two things. So we really are not in a position to bring the ag mitigation agreement forward until the NIA agreement is completed, but we're working very hard on both of those. The next two agreements, the CWCD SRP exchange agreement, just to remind everybody what that is. It is a 50,000 acre-foot exchange between SRP and CWCD. It is part primarily of the offset plan, where SRP will deliver over the period 50,000 acre-feet of SRP water to common CAP SRP customers, and in return, CWCD will leave 50,000 acre-feet of its ICS in Lake Mead for the period through 2026 and repay SRP for the exchange after 2026. We are bringing that draft agreement to our board on Thursday at another special board meeting this week. And likewise with the agreement after that, this is a 3-party agreement between the United States, ADWR, and CWCD on the Arizona ICS Framework Agreement. And we're bringing that as well to our board for approval on Thursday as well. And the other two parties will await their approval thereafter. The next agreement, number 6, CRIT System Conservation Agreement. This is something that Director Bushatsky referred to a moment ago when he was discussing the funding of $30 million appropriated by the legislature and $8 million from EDF on behalf of the NGO community. We'll fund that particular agreement. It's listed on this page because CAWCD will be a party due to its need to forbear on that creation. But the drafting of that is in the hands of others, and it also, I think, is being worked on very diligently by the other parties. Any questions on this page before I flip to the next page? Okay. So on the next page, I again will go down to the bottom here, is that on the same day as the legislation was passed, the DCP legislation was passed in Arizona, in the same room that you saw the photo a moment ago, that Governor Lewis and Board President Lisa Atkins and Board Secretary Sharon Megdal executed the agreements relating to the GRIC GROWS CHRD water supply acquisition. A couple of those agreements still require execution by the United States, and that's another one of these things. I can't pick a single one that's not being worked on. Another one that's being diligently worked on to bring all of that to completion as well. So back up to the top. There are a couple of types of agreements that are being worked on, finalized. One, number 9, EPCOR being able to make or divert some GSF water from the Phoenix AMA to the Pinal AMA. And that continues to be discussed and worked upon. Next, and I suspect this is one of the ones, Ms. Campbell, that's being brought to the Phoenix City Council. There are a series of USF, GSF agreements that the Phoenix AMA cities are relocating some of their underground storage from USFs in the Phoenix AMA to GSFs in the Pinal AMA. So those agreements are being drafted and negotiated directly between the participants that are providing the stored water and the ag districts at which the water will be stored. And there also will be some credit exchanges with the water bank that will, I believe, be separate agreements from the USF, from the GSF storage agreement. And there at some point in time will also be some recovery agreements involved with this. So this is a good example of, there's these other things that are going to happen in addition to what's being shown up here on the screen. Well, we actually have there the next one, AWBA recovery agreements. This is something that is necessary for some of these credit exchanges for the water bank to be able to recover some of its Pinal County credits that it receives in exchange under number 10 to be able to use those credits where they're needed. The next two, 12 and 13, are similar to each other. They are both ICS will be created by the Gila River Indian community. These are both part of the offset program, as was, by the way, number 6 on the previous page, the Colorado River Indian Tribes System Conservation is also part of the offset program. These two will be ICS created by the Gila River Indian community. One, number 12, on behalf of the United States for U.S. tribal firming, and one, number 13, on behalf of the state of Arizona through the Water Banking Authority for tribal firming. That's the responsibility of the state of Arizona. 100,000 acre-feet on number 12, 50,000 acre-feet on number 13. Number 14 and number 15, both of these are concepts that arose from the interstate discussions with our counterparts in Nevada and California, that the state of Arizona through ADWR will be a party. One of them is the number 14 is the ability to borrow ICS capacity among the states, and this will be for creation capacity. That in any year that one of the contractors in any one of the lower basin states desires to or expects to exceed its creation capacity in a year, they can work with another party in another state to use a portion of that other state's unused creation capacity. And then 15 is similar to that, except it has to do with the aggregate ICS storage capacity in Lake Mead to be able to borrow, and this is more of a permanent type of thing, borrow some aggregate storage capacity, and specifically Arizona would be allowed to borrow 100,000 acre-feet of ICS capacity belonging to Metropolitan Water District in California and Southern Nevada Water Authority in Nevada. If you will recall that under DCP, Arizona's aggregate ICS storage capacity goes from 300,000 acre-feet to 500,000 acre-feet. This agreement would take it to 600,000 acre-feet. And so that allows all of the flexibility that we need in Arizona to do the offset program, particularly as we're consuming the 400+ thousand acre-feet that Arizona will already have, and replacing it with the ICS that is created under the offset program. There needs to be room to do all of that. This is the way to get that done. I think I covered every single one. Any questions on page 2? There are also, this is just an example, there are also many other discussions that are going on. For instance, CWCD and ADWR received lots of communication, some of them more formal, some of them less formal, during all of these meetings saying, hey, we would like to talk to you about water we have that might be available for conservation. And so we have means to try and do some of those things. The CWCD's board approved $60 million that is currently slated to be used for what we call compensated mitigation, which would be payments to the NIA pool because there's not enough wet water to provide all the mitigation that is planned for. And so in the event that there's someone with a bona fide supply of water for conservation that we can use for delivery, we will use some of the $60 million to deliver wet water instead of make a payment. So there's lots of things behind the scenes that are going on as well. Any questions? Okay, let's keep going. Oh yeah, Cynthia, did you want to, was there anything else that you wanted to add as far as the agreements that are coming before the council? Are they 3 of type 10?
There are 3 agreements. One is the NIA mitigation agreement. The other is the USF to GSF. And then the third one that's not identified on this list is an IGA between Phoenix and probably other cities and the Arizona Water Bank regarding the exchange of credits after credits are earned in Pinal County and then exchanged with ones that are existing in the Phoenix AMA.
Okay, thank you, and congratulations on taking that to your council.
Also an announcement, March 4th at 10 a.m. at DWR. We have an Arizona Water Banking Authority meeting scheduled. We hope to have agreements that need to be approved by the Banking Commission ready to go at that meeting. So another mark your calendar kind of date. Hopefully we'll be ready with several of the agreements by then.
Okay, so now we move a little bit to the interstate status. As you all probably know, that the day after the previous reclamation deadline issued by Commissioner Berman at the CRUA conference in December, that deadline was January 31st. On February 1st, the commissioner implemented a Federal Register notice that there would be comments would be solicited from the representatives of the governors of the 7 basin states on what I will refer to as an alternative approach to sustaining Lake Mead in the Colorado River Basin in the event that DCP did not come together. But in recognition of the progress that had been made, particularly of that in Arizona on the 31st of January, the commissioner deferred the comment period to commence on March 4th, and it would last for 2 weeks on March 4th. So we are all working very hard, as you have heard on the previous couple of slides, to get as many of these intra-Arizona agreements done as possible. However, Director Bushatsky and I jointly penned a letter to Commissioner Berman last week that respectfully informed her that we considered Arizona's responsibilities regarding being done with respect to the interstate agreement having been achieved on January 31st, and that we would do our utmost to get as many of the intra-Arizona details ironed out by March 4th as possible. And you can see we're going to make great progress. Probably more than half of that list is going to be done by March 4th. But not because of the deadline, it's because we need to get it done. And we're all still working in the same direction, but we needed to make that point clear. The interstate ICS process is that, as I think many of you will remember, that one of the key expectations as part of the signing of the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan agreements themselves will be the mutual exchange and approval of ICS exhibits, finalization of both pending exhibits that have already been around for some period of time and under which ICS has already been created, specifically quite an amount created by CWCD under an exhibit that has not been approved by every Lower Basin party yet, that and also pending exhibits and new exhibits for the DCP process will be shared among the states. Tom and I received confirmation this morning that we will have a Lower Basin principals meeting in the upcoming week. The other basin states, I don't believe that we've had their exhibits shared with us yet, and maybe that's what's going to take place at this upcoming meeting. But that's it. We want to get those things in while we're all convened and doing this. As we said before, it doesn't mean that a new exhibit created next month or next year or anytime between now and 2026 can't be done. It can be done, but it'll be by itself, trying to wend its way through this complicated process. This is an opportunity to get all of this done now while we're all focusing on this. And that is what a lot of the work that's ongoing now on the interstate level is focusing on that. Tom, did you have anything to add, or Leslie? Okay. And then finally, congressional approval. For some weeks leading up to the January 31st deadline, right after that, and now as on an ongoing basis, the 7 basin states are having ongoing discussions about the timing and the approach to go to Congress and seek congressional approval. This is a concept of what that proposed federal legislation would look like. Be fairly simple. That would authorize or direct the Secretary of the Interior to execute the named agreements, and there they are on the screen. The agreement concerning the Colorado River Drought Contingency Management and Operations, and other agreements without delay, and to carry out the provisions of such agreements and operate the Colorado River reservoirs accordingly. My personal expectation is that this will occur over the next month or so, that the time will be right to go to Congress and encourage them to pass this legislation. I think, not speaking for the Department of the Interior or Reclamation, they expect all of the state parties to be where Arizona is. And as Tom mentioned earlier, that Imperial Irrigation District, I think, is the major remaining party that needs to have some attention.
And I want to add that our vision of how this proposed federal legislation will move forward will be all 14 senators and most, if not all, of the representatives, all either on the legislation, hopefully, or certainly actively supporting this legislation. It's really important that it be done that way, that it be seen as bipartisan. And I think that is the positive path forward, and that's what we will be seeking from my perspective in any discussions that certainly I'm involved in with any of the members of either our delegation or delegations from the other states.
Any questions? Any questions on the federal approach, timeline? It's about as much as we know right now. Everything obviously overlaps and is being pursued in parallel. Before we move to the next section of the meeting, I'd like to remind everyone, the delegates in particular, that we, Tom and I, had, as co-chairs, had sent out, we had talked about considering something like this before, sent out language for a resolution of this committee on the Arizona Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan implementation in Arizona. There were copies on the back table. I hope everybody has one. I don't know, Tom, if you want us to read it into the record, if that's necessary or not. But everyone should have a copy of this. It is a non-binding resolution. And the operative word is, under the resolution itself, is that the steering committee delegates pledge to continue to work in good faith to execute and implement all of the elements of the Arizona DCP implementation plan. It's a pledge. There are a limited number of recitals of whereas clauses. It kind of outlines where we started as far as beginning to meet in July of last year, selected steering committee delegates representing Arizona water users, stakeholders, and legislative leaders, invested a considerable amount of time and resources from all the delegates and members, and over the course of 7 months, now it's 8 months, the steering committee met 9 times. This is the 9th meeting. I counted them again to make sure there were 9. And that the implementation plan includes both a mitigation component and an offset component, and what the purposes of those two things are. And recognizing that the mitigation does not fully mitigate everyone for everything that they will lose under DCP, and recognition of a bridge to a drier future. And the deadline that was announced by the commissioner on January 31st, and that the legislative package that was passed by the Arizona legislature and signed by Governor Ducey on January 21st, that Arizona met the federal deadline, and therefore resolved, as I read before, that the members of this committee pledge to continue to work in good faith to implement all the elements of the plan that we developed. So every delegate sitting at the table has got, or alternate, has got a single sheet for your signature. If you're able and willing to do that today, we'd love to collect that from you. You can either leave it at your place, or there is a nice zinc-coated bucket in the back of the room that you may deposit your ballot in, if you're so inclined to do that. And if you need some time to think about it, or run it by your attorneys or something like that, that's fine too. Go ahead and take it, and we will add your page to the pack. If an alternate is attending today and you feel moved to sign this on behalf of your delegate, feel free to do that. If your delegate says, no, I want to sign it later, fine, we'll get that from them and we'll put that in the packet as well. This is a ceremonial thing that we're doing here, but we think, Tom and I, that this would be a nice gesture at the end of all of our hard work to pledge our commitment to finish everything, even though we're not going to formally meet again. So with that intro, unless, Tom, you have something that you would like to add, we'd like to go around the table and allow the delegates to speak.
So since there are no closing remarks on the agenda, I just wanted to add the following. I want to thank everyone, all the delegates sitting around this table, I want to thank their alternates. I want to thank all the folks at the legislature. I want to thank everyone in the audience. I know that there are a lot of people who wanted to be around this table that couldn't be, trying to manage the size of the table, obviously, but I think there was a lot of work done by everyone around this table, but also by folks sitting out in the audience as part of work groups, as part of ad hoc informal discussions, support by so many of you at the legislature as the package was moving through. I just really wanted to thank everyone again for all of your hard work, your help. I think it really speaks volumes that we were up against some very difficult issues. We still have a much larger place to go in terms of looking at the sustainability of the river. This is a small step forward, a bridge, so to speak, to that drier future that Ted talked about. We will need all of your help again as we enter the next phase, what I see the next phase being the renegotiation of the 2007 guidelines. And we will look for all of you to help again in that regard, in that process, so that Arizona will be among its colleagues in the other states, unified in its position moving forward and getting that next phase of management of the river put in place.
And everyone did work so hard. Everyone in this room, a lot of people who are not here today, and hopefully will be able to watch these proceedings at some point in time in the future and share in our recognition today. I would like to specifically thank my co-chair, Tom Bushatsky. This was very time-consuming and very hard work, and took both of us working together to make this all happen. But a special shout-out to, as hard as everyone worked, nobody worked harder than the ADWR and the CAP staff on bringing this all together. So I really would like to thank them. They set most of the rest of their job aside for 8 months, but we still all got that work done while all of this was happening. And I know you all did the same thing too. But I think they deserve some special recognition for being behind the scenes and making this all work as seamlessly as it did, and this very important work that we did. So with that, let's start at this end this time with Cheryl, and we'll go around clockwise this time.
I just want to thank all of you. I especially want to thank Tom and Ted and echo your sentiments about the staff. It was, not possible without all of that work as well. I appreciate the comments earlier by Speaker Bowers and Governor Lewis, staying together, working on this issue. It's a very challenging issue. I feel confident that this will work out. I also want to thank other people that are not here. We've had some separate meetings that I think were very productive, a lot of time put into this. It's a great day. Continue working forward, and just thank you.
Like Cheryl, I'd like to thank everybody for their efforts. I think the people in this room and the folks that aren't here and the staffs that worked show that Arizona can come together for the mutual benefit of the state. Thank you.
We got here. It wasn't easy. It wasn't expected to be easy. There's a lot left to be done. Probably shouldn't say that it's a certain and done deal yet, but thanks to everyone.
I'd like to thank the co-chairs, Tom and Ted, for all your hard work. I've always heard the term, herding cats, and if there's such a thing as herding jellyfish, I think that's what you've done here. And I really appreciate all the work that you and the staff folks at DWR and CAWCD have put into this effort. I'd really like to thank the governor's office for their leadership, Speaker Bowers, and President Fan for the leadership in getting the legislation across the line. Really appreciate that. Particularly like to thank the Gila River Indian community and the Colorado River Indian tribe for their contributions to this. Without those, this wouldn't be possible. It is but a very small step in a very long process that will continue. And so hopefully we maintain this, and herding those jellyfish, the practice that you have now
will come in handy in the future, and we'll keep moving forward. Thank you.
I'd like to just echo the thanks that everybody's given thus far, both for the leadership and for the willingness to participate. It always hasn't been easy. I want to say a special thank you to everybody around the table for allowing different regions to really participate in this discussion. It's been great to represent and carry the message back to Southern Arizona. And as said, this is just the beginning. Water will always be an issue. There is always more work to be done. And I encourage, as you stand back up the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council, that we'd appreciate if you ensure that the other regions of the community and the state are represented as well on that council, and look forward to working with everybody in the future.
The City of Scottsdale is representing them. Again, I appreciate both the co-chairs for their leadership, as well as, again, it's going to sound similar, everybody around the table, and particularly the staff members of all of our organizations for the hard work they did. Appreciate all the cooperation, and with that, I'll quickly pass this on.
Okay. Excuse me, I too also thank the co-chairs, but I also very thankful and appreciative that I was given the opportunity to serve and working with delegates to try to find solutions to the issues. I know we still have some work to do, but we're getting there. March 4th, next deadline, so thanks.
It's been a privilege to be part of the Arizona DCP Steering Committee on behalf of the NGO community and Walton Family Foundation. I would just observe that, as Ted Cook said on a few occasions, including at the legislature, that when we approach water from a standpoint of being data-driven, transparent, and from a broad-based stakeholder involvement process, we tend to do better in Arizona on water. The importance of that dynamic going forward, I don't think can be overstated, given the renegotiation of the 2007 guidelines looming, and given the many issues that we've heard about, representing various constituencies that we did not address and should not appropriately have addressed as part of taking this step for the Colorado River. We know those issues are out there and more work to be done. And so I'm privileged to be a spokesperson for a solution-oriented, Arizona-centric NGO community, and look forward to continuing to work on the issues we need to address. Thank you.
Just want to voice our appreciation for the co-chairs for leading the steering committee, as well as all the members and their alternates helping to get us to this point. I can speak on behalf of those in Southern Arizona. We look forward to future conversations related around the topic of water, in particular the new Water Augmentation Council, and moving forward and continuing to work on that. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all. It's been a pleasure to work with this group, and trying at times, but I think we got to a good place. Thank you to the co-chairs. I'd like to thank my alternate, Andrew Greenhill, who really worked tirelessly to help keep me prepared and productive throughout these, and thank also the Tucson Mayor and Council for always supporting DCP and providing some creative solutions.
Ted, Tom, thanks again for your leadership and your ongoing dedication to the remaining process here. I really appreciated the broad and diverse discussions and perspective that have gone on over these past 8 months. It's been really illuminating because of the number of sectors that we were able to have at the table here, which again, it's been voiced before, but is different from a lot of the other discussions to the date. I'd also like to call out particular thanks to Representative Gabaldon, who had hosted our Southern Arizona Stakeholders Forum. So we were able to have delegates in Southern Arizona come together and have another clearinghouse of discussions to be able to come back with more informed discussions in these committees. Thank you.
I want to reiterate the thank you to Ted and Tom for the immense amount of work put in for this. Also, repeat the thank you to CAP and ADWR staff, a tremendous amount of work to get to where we are today. Also, a special thank you to Speaker Bowers, Senator Griffin, and the other legislators. The time spent in this process has been, I know, a significant burden for them, but it's just been, I think, part of our success here has been their participation. Also wanted to say a special thanks to the Colorado River Indian Tribe and the Gila River Indian community. Their participation, I think, has made this successful, and I wanted to send an extra thank you to Governor Lewis for the work done on the GRD GRIC deal, which I think is a historic and a very important agreement, and wanted to thank the governor for that.
First, I'd like to applaud the collaborative nature of this body. Many of us see the water world pretty differently, and we had to work hard to get to a point where we could move forward in this process. To me, the singular most important part was that the leadership of DWR and CAP stayed together and kept us together. I think if that had gone sideways, I don't think this process would have been successful. So I particularly want to thank the leadership of CAP and the Department of Water Resources for keeping this process moving in a unified direction. And I could single out a lot of folks, but I think who I'd like to single out at this point is EDF and Kevin Moran. They brought us together with the cities over a year ago to begin trying to work through some solutions. That was a very, very difficult conversation, many occasions, but I think it helped us get to where we were. So, Kevin, thanks for that leadership.
So with the idea of seeking to understand before seeking to be understood, I want to say thank you so much for this forum and this opportunity to have all of us expand our understanding of a lot of different water views and issues. I think we've come together in an open, transparent process, and I'm just grateful this has been a unique process in the true sense of unique. And so with that, I think we've got a good platform and process to go forward to tackle whatever those next challenges are.
And to expand on Karen's comments with regard to the opportunity that this has provided to listen and learn, I too want to thank the leadership of the steering committee, Ted and Tom, and all of the staffs that have been involved in doing their work. But I also would like to publicly thank all the members of the CAP board. While Karen and I have had the opportunity to sit at this table for the most part, our alternates, Jim Holloway and Mark Taylor, also played a role, but our board members have been engaged. As you can tell from the review of the activities, the board took up its responsibility very eagerly and kept things moving at a pace not to hold back this committee in their deliberations, and I personally appreciate the board for doing that. Thank you.
As a representative of the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Reclamation, I want to sincerely congratulate all of the steering committee members and everyone else that has worked on the DCP for all that you have accomplished. And as an Arizonan, I just want to say that I'm really proud to have been a part of this, and that Reclamation and the Department of Interior, we are all our local staff and all of our staff throughout the United States, we are absolutely committed to finishing the agreements that were outlined and to continue to working together into the future on these issues.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin by thanking all of your predecessors. We stand on the work and the skill of a lot of people. I know that Tom had a predecessor. He had a great mentor in his career. I've learned a lot about that gentleman. And he is now imparting information and skill and history to me. And for all the people who have brought you to this point on the steering committee, the people who have allowed you to sit at this table and to work through these difficult issues, I'm very grateful that we have this kind of group that can work through this difficult set of circumstances. So I first want to thank those people. I also believe it's very important to thank the members of the legislature. The Speaker has put a lot of time in his calendar for this, and it is very much appreciated. To Senator Kerr, Senator Otondo, Representative Griffin, and Representative Gabaldon, their alternates, and those who have all come from the House and the Senate to come and listen to these proceedings and to become educated on issues related to water. I would like to personally thank them. I know that the governor thanks them as well. There's a lot of gravity around this situation, around the issues that face us as a state. We are very blessed to have other parties in the basin who are willing to work with us in the upper and lower basin. So I would like to thank our counterparts in the other states for coming to the table early, working with Tom and Ted to hash out the details of what DCP should be. I'd also like to thank Leslie. She has done a great job representing the federal government. She has come to the table with solutions and the ability to work through hard problems. I would like to thank her and her staff. And I believe we owe Tom and Ted and their team a round of applause for all the work that they've done. We need to continue to soldier on. This will not be the end of water conversations in the state. And for you and your folks, we hope and expect that you will continue to work with this administration and find the solutions that need to be found. Thank you very much.
Likewise, I'd like to thank all of you for allowing our presence and being with you as legislators, especially now Representative Griffin. It has been an enjoyable, now going on 3 years, to learn not only about water, but about people and how we view water in our daily lives. And there's much yet to do. As I've mentioned, we face a challenge of changing our entire ethic about water and water use. And I believe that we must and will. It is again a pleasure to be with all of you. So many different interests. It is amazing the complexity of that simple cup of water that we enjoy in the morning. And we need it into the future, and I'm grateful to have been a part, and we will, as Hunter has said, we will soldier on. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Governor Ducey, Speaker Bowers, President Fan, Director Buchowski, Ted Cook, and the CAP board for conducting an inclusive and transparent sessions here. Crit looks forward to participating in any future negotiation over the future of water in Arizona. And I want to thank all of you that I got to know over these months and see all your different diverse issues with water, and we come to appreciate that more, and we hope to look forward to working on anything else in the future. Thank you.
Well, the GRD greatly appreciated the opportunity to have been part of the DCP steering committee, and I want to thank you, Tom and Ted. I believe it was evident through the process that as Arizona does move to a drier future, that continued sustained economic development is an important component of that plan, and the GRD plays an important role in accomplishing this. I also acknowledge and understand that there is still a desire by many to discuss GRD issues, and I look forward and I'm committed to continuing that discussion into the future. Thank you.
I will join everyone else in the choir in thanking Tom and Ted in particular for their leadership and In particular, as an ex-staff member, I would like to also express my appreciation and understanding of all the work that the staff in both DWR and CAP and the Bureau and everyone else's organizations around this table. Thank you, Speaker Bowers, for your guidance and help and assistance in this process, and I'd like to thank the Gila River Indian community and the Colorado River Indian tribes for their participation in this. Thank you.
I'd just like to express our appreciation for our co-chairs' leadership, Tom and Ted, and for the legislative representatives here and all of the diverse delegates that have come to the table and made DCP what it is. We hope that this will provide a platform for a way to help plan for Arizona's water future in the long term and not just the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you to the co-chairs, Tom and Ted, and for all the steering committee members for the amount of time and effort that I think you all have put into this. I know there was a lot of work behind the scenes as well as smaller working groups. Coming into a meeting like this, in the meetings, I was fully expecting a number of compromises to be made and some hand-wringing and dragging of feet because knowing that there were a certain number of things that were going to be given up in the process and that we would all bear to one degree or another some of the impacts of that. There were some silver linings in some of the things that happened, so I think having a sort of an on-the-ground discussion about recovery wells, developing and looking at recovery wells, I think is a great thing. I think it's long overdue. So I was pleasantly surprised to start having some real discussions about that. As is my nature, though, I'm never quite satisfied with what we have or what we think we have. And I'm also consistent, if not persistent, in some of the things that I've talked about in this forum. One of them being the need to do more with WaterBud. I think even if we achieve all of the goals we've set out in this plan, I think there's more that needs to be done going forward. And I do believe that WaterBud, if more robust repeal, would open up, I think, some more management options that we would have going forward. And I look forward to perhaps having a further discussion about that once we get the DCP done. But anyway, thank you, everybody, for all your efforts and for the opportunity.
On behalf of SRP and Chuck Podolak, my alternate, just want to thank Tom and Ted and their staffs for all the challenging work that they've been through over the last 3 years, and particularly over the last 6 months. A lot of time has been spent on pulling this DCP together. It's a pleasure to serve with the rest of you on the committee. And I particularly want to thank Governor Lewis and Chairman Patch for their participation. I have worked with a lot of tribes over many, many years. I was pleased that they were a part of the steering committee, that you all brought them in as part of that. I hope they are part of the Governor's Water Commission that's going to soon go forward. I think it's important that the tribes are participating in Arizona's water management. They have a lot to offer, not only in their obviously their water supplies that they're capable of using, but also the expertise that they bring as well. And so I'm particularly pleased that they were part of this. Without their contributions, I don't think we would have got this done. There's a lot of work that they put in behind the scenes to get this done, and I particularly thank them for participating. Thank you.
One of the things that Stephanie Smallhouse says quite a bit is that good water planning is really messy, and it has to be. And we just want to thank Mr. Cook, Director Bushatsky, for being willing to steer into that mess and to take that mess head on and to come out of it with something that is good for our state, good for growth and industry in our state, and will be something that we look back on in years to come and say that we're glad we did it and that it was best for everyone involved. I also want to say a thank you to Speaker Bowers, President Fan, and some of your colleagues as well who aren't here today, Senator Kerr, Representative Dunn, Representative Griffin, for all the work that you've done to educate your colleagues on this issue and all the work that you've done to listen very carefully to constituent concerns and to address those concerns in meaningful ways. And as many have said, the work's not done, and we look forward to working with you on these and many other issues going forward.
On behalf of the Arizona Chamber and Glenn Hammer, I'd just like to thank you for allowing us to be part of this conversation. We really appreciate the leadership of the co-chairs and all of the hard work of their staffs, the governor's office, legislative leadership, and everyone around this table. We look forward to future conversations as well.
On behalf of the City of Goodyear, I'd like to just echo the thanks that everyone has shared with you, and both to Ted and Tom, thank you for your leadership. Taking this, as I think back to July and where we started, and how the DCP discussions were being viewed from outside of Arizona, and now we're in a place where we're certainly in par with others, if not ahead. So thank you.
Doug, on behalf of EPCOR, again, echoing what's obviously been said, the hard work from the leadership of the co-chairs, the governor's office, our legislative leadership, tribal members. The one thing that I wanted to kind of reflect on here is that it's been an honor to be part of this historic discussion. And as I've briefed my superiors and my masters in Canada on the process that was going through here in Arizona, they're amazed of the cooperation of the diverse group and particularly the assistance of the tribal participation. You just don't see that. And my response has always been, we're Arizonans, that's what we do. So I look forward to finalizing some agreements, and I can hardly wait for the negotiation to renew the guidelines.
Let me just echo the comments of others. I appreciate the efforts of Phoenix staff, the hard work of other parties around the table, and especially the work of CAWCD, ADWR, the tribal interests, reclamation, and the other parties here in getting us to this point. And Phoenix looks forward to finishing this agreement and moving on to other important issues in water.
Thank you, everyone. We have a few minutes in a moment for public comment, if any. And before we formally adjourn here in a couple of minutes, I've failed to mention this before, we'd like to assemble the delegates out on the steps for a photo. And any of the alternates who are here in the audience that would like to join us for that here in just a minute. It's a kind of final thing to document our work together, a photo out on the steps. Any final comments, Director Bushotsky? Okay, with that, the public comment, the microphone is here. If you'd like to, anyone would like to step up and speak, introduce yourself, who you represent. Seeing none, then the 9th and final meeting of the Arizona Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan Steering Committee is adjourned.